Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Rock Pile. It's been a little while since I've been back in front of everybody, but it's good to be back here on the podcast. And tonight I welcome back a special guest. He was the first martial arts guy to come on the show. I'll bring on Heath Waterman in just a minute. He'll bring on his team as well. I'm excited to talk to Heath. The last time we talked, I thought it was a year ago, but it was actually 2 years ago. So it'll be fun to catch up with him on some of the changes that have been going on at his two places and much more, some new programs, some new marketed trends, and much more. If you're listening for the first time, make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube, where we're coming across YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. If you have any comments, questions for the team tonight, you can put them in the comment box, and I'll try to pull over as many as I can tonight. If you're watching on the replay, please make sure you can still put questions in at any time. So without further ado, let's bring on Heath and the team. Good evening, everybody. How are you guys?
Good yourself.
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm excited to bring you back on, Heath. As we were talking a little bit before the show, you were the first martial arts guy to kind of kick this thing off for me on the podcast, and I think I learned more about martial arts that night than I ever have. So I'm happy to have you back.
I'm happy to be back. Thank you for having us.
No problem. So I like the shirts. The shirts look great. And this time you have a whole team with you. So if you want, can you just introduce who you have tonight?
Yeah, so we'll start right to my right. This is Jeanine Conway. She's our primary sword instructor and co-owner of the business. Next to her is Levi Legler. He's our grappling instructor and does a little bit of personal training on the side. He keeps us in shape and healthy.
Yep.
And then over here is Joe Chevrette. He is our man of many hats, logo ninja, business advisor, everything. So got a great group here, and I'll let you, talk to each one individually. So
yeah, absolutely. So first, I just want to start. So last time you and I talked, it was a couple years ago with the whole COVID, and COVID, changed the world, and we're trying to get back to some normalcy. How's business been since COVID?
Different. We've had, of course, we got back in person. We're back to doing partner work and everything else like everyone else does. Biggest hurdle we've had to deal with is people want to just do 1 day a week. Like before, they were doing 2-3 times a week, and we've had an issue of people are just happy doing 1 or 2 hours, 1 day a week, and then trying to get people motivated to do that again. But overall, I think our program's never been stronger. We talked about a little bit last time that the break from COVID allowed us to kind of reevaluate and spend some time experimenting because we had more free time. So we still do one-on-ones virtually. That's been a big help. And then, as you'll learn tonight, the programs we've developed have really taken everything to a whole other level. So,
have you seen an uptick with the virtual? Because I know, obviously, with COVID, even myself here in my position, everything was virtual. It was Zoom calls. It was go-to meetings. Have you seen people? Has that spiked a little bit? Has that continued to be pretty steady for you since COVID?
To a degree, people were in a hurry to get off of Zoom as soon as they could. But where it really came in handy was one-on-ones, because that's something we always offered everyone, included with their tuition. And then, but trying to travel, mom has to get home from work, take the kid over, and everything else. This allows a kid comes home from school, they can do their one-on-one. So there's a lot more personal and one-on-one training through the Zoom opportunities than we had before. So,
and I would think too, because just in my case, so I have two young ones. I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old that are really active in sports. So for my son to say, just an example, hey, I'd like to do one of your classes that you offer. How do you adjust to the younger population are so busy with playing sports that might be doing 2 or 3 different sports that maybe don't have time? Is it the virtual piece?
The virtual, again, we've stayed more one-on-one, or like if we have a snow day, the actual classes are in person now. But yeah, the busy schedule of people doing 2 to 3 sports is something that was one of the things we had to kind of deal with as COVID wound down. And that's something we're going to be talking about when we talk about the changes that we've made. But a lot of it was kind of realizing that if they're going to commit with the direction that we're going toward the self-defense aspect, they're going to have to make a little bit more of a commitment to the school. Obviously, we're, with virtual, we use that to help people out as much as possible, but it doesn't beat in-person classes. It's a nice supplement, a nice extension of the training, but you got to get in there and get your hands on people type deal.
And I think that's a good segment too, because you guys offer a variety of different classes.
Yep.
What are some of those classes that you guys offer?
Well, we'll start right down here with Jeanine.
Hey, Rocky. So I am the primary sword instructor, as Heath was saying. I originally got my black belt with Sensei Woodcock and continued to train alongside with Heath for several years after, until I decided that I wanted to develop my own curriculum. So I worked alongside with him, and we developed a sword curriculum from start to black belt. Sword is kind of a different beast as grappling and karate, in the sense that it is physical, but the strong aspect of sword is the mental component that you have to utilize as well. So that is something that drew me to utilizing sword, and it's helped me immensely with hand-eye coordination, and also learning to respect a weapon. So I think it's quite different, but it plays a role in the other aspects as well.
So Jeanine, how did you get involved with the sword stuff? Because it's probably something, and again, you guys know more about this than I do, but are there other places that offer sword? I don't feel like this is a really common thing that's offered, so I think this is very unique that you guys
Right.
do.
Not that I know of. I believe there is a place in New Hartford that offers, but we're more of a we have our own style. We have a little bit of traditional sword involved in it, but we also incorporate our own self-defenses with that. So it's a little bit different than your.
Yeah. To add off to that, because everyone wants to create their own style.
Sure.
We actually started this past year training out from a guy out in Indiana who's a 6th degree in kendo and traditional martial arts to shore up some of our weaknesses. But a lot of where we were is, as she mentioned, the self-defense is a through line through our entire school,
right,
regardless of what course you are. So the sword we have, it's not so much our own style, it's how we applied it to our testing curriculum that you have the karate. So it's kind of like a karate person's interpretation of a sword, and then we're bolstering the rest of the sword with the guy from Indiana, Sensei Hero. But it is much more self-defense and application focused than your traditional art.
And Jeanine, how'd you get started with the sword part of it?
I actually started. Autumn, my oldest, was taking classes with Heath in karate. She's got her black belt through Waterman's, and I basically just didn't want to really sit around. Working a 9-to-5 job, it kind of gave me an outlet. So I actually just tried it one night, and the second I started, I enjoyed it and went from there.
And I know you got the guy next to you, Levi, right? So you're the grappling. Talk to us a little bit about the grappling.
Okay, so this is kind of like a hybrid mix of wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So more like a traditional catch wrestling, I guess. But it's more geared towards high percentage maneuvers. And a lot of traditional grappling schools, you'll learn really fancy stuff. And not all of it is really applicable in a self-defense scenario. You know, I mean, there are times when people are doing rolling things on the back of their head, and you know, if you're on concrete, that's probably not a great idea. So we try to develop a system where you know you learn these maneuvers and you learn how to defend yourself against somebody who might know some of these maneuvers. I started as a wrestler back in middle school. And I actually had a rough go of it, to be completely honest with you, to begin with it. And that's really what drew me to it. It was the toughest thing that I'd ever done. It was, I lost every single match my first year. It was really bad. But you know, 20 years later, you know, it's, you know, grinding down on it. Eventually it instills all this confidence. And once you really get the knack of it, it's so universally applicable. So yeah, so that's generally the. Yeah.
Is the grappling more geared towards a certain age group, or do you find all ages are, you know, interested, or is it certain demographics?
Actually, it's funny that you say that because it's our class right now, at least in Hamilton, is probably split right down the middle between older students and younger students. That's a lot of our drills actually basically end up being two separate like mini tournaments where you've got, everyone up to 10 years old and then everybody from 40. Yeah. So, that's really one of the things that I love about grappling in general is that it's something you can do if you learn how to do it, you learn how to do it safely. It's something you can do through your whole life.
Yep.
And you can do it without like continuous injury. Again, if you apply it properly and you learn your limits.
So one of the big things now that's big on TV is obviously the MMA stuff. I was an old school boxing guy. I used to love watching the boxing fights with my grandfather, and I feel like now the boxing days are over, and it's a lot of the MMA stuff. Do you find like the grappling? I mean, that's part of the MMA. Do you think it's getting more popular because of the MMA stuff on TV?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I mean, UFC 1 was basically a big advertisement for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but it was a lot of the people in that tournament were handpicked so that they wouldn't match up well against a grappler. And that really helped sell this whole thing. But I mean, either way, it's at the end of the day, the statistics show that grappling is extremely effective. 40%, I think, of all MMA champions or UFC champions have been wrestlers. So, yes. I mean, then it's now, and that's more than twice the next art behind it. So, I mean, I think that right there, it does show, it showcases it definitely. And I myself actually started, I'm a mixed martial artist too. So, I mean, so that's where a lot of my inspiration for these lessons come from, is that, it's this practical application, and it is a different beast once you start incorporating, somebody punching you in the head while you're trying to do it.
And I feel like too, is when people think of martial arts, they think it's just karate, but there's so much more that's made up of martial arts. I think people really don't realize. Can you guys talk to us a little bit about the karate piece of it?
Yeah. So even within karate, that's Okinawan based and it migrated into Japan, there's like 5 subsets of karate itself. So in our case, because I came through the Zendo Kai under Michael Campos, which he was much more focused on standards and building an actual set curriculum and process to reach those standards, independent of actual style of karate or even different martial arts, that we are much more application focused. So karate obviously is a lot more striking. That's one reason why we brought Levi in, was because our grappling was non-existent. So that gives us that idea that all our students, regardless of what program they want to major in, quote unquote, they all have to get a certain level of basics from everything else. So grapplers need to be familiar with some basic weapons and striking, strikers the same way, sword people the same way. So you're getting that well-roundedness, even if you want to focus on grappling or striking. But karate, of course, has been the cornerstone of the school because that's my background. And now it's becoming less one thing and more like 3 pillars and so forth and so on. But it's a lot of striking, a lot of kind of what let us translate into other things as we went along.
So Heath, if you have like, let's say, I know you guys do beginner stuff, but somebody that's interested, and I don't know if it's sword, it could be grappling, could be karate. How do you gear them towards where to start?
Whatever seems most fun to them.
Right.
So, because different things speak, like Jeanine said, she actually started kickboxing with me, just kind of a cardio kickboxing type thing. And then Woodcock, who was teaching me at the time, was like, hey, you want to try this? And basically put a sword in her hand and was just like lightning went off. And I think everyone kind of has their own thing. Like, I love the grappling, I love the sword, but I'm a striker. I like distance, I like spacing. I need to know that stuff, but at the end of the day, I want to stay on my feet and use my hands and feet to keep people away from me. So everyone kind of gravitates to that, and ideally is people get to the point where they just want to do all of it.
Right. We have a lot of students that actually are in all 3. So we piece out the classes so that they're able to jump in either one. So
And I
You
mean,
guys, I was just say, so you guys have the beginner classes, and then you also have, was it the Mighty Monkeys?
yep, those are the beginner students.
that's age. So those are like the under 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yep.
Okay. And then I know you have Joe. I know you're brought in too with marketing a bunch of different things. Talk to us about. I know you mentioned Heath some of the newer programs that are out there. I don't know if Joe you want to start it and everybody can jump in. But what are some of the new programs?
Yep. So I'm Joe. I started off with Heath over 10 years ago now
yeah,
at
it
this
was
point.
2012.
Yeah. So Heath has always been constantly changing, always adjusting to, we always take a look at the market, say, all right, what's everybody else doing? Let's do something different. So that's something we always been very good at. I mean, we've traveled much all over the country trying to look into what we're going to do, whether it be, all right, let's build this crazy, huge thing that's going to cost $1 million. And it turns out it's a terrible idea. Or how about this? And it ends up taking off. And it's just a real simple, plan. So everything that we do is really geared towards doing it different. And, that's like when you ask, what do they start off in? The answer was there is no basis. It's everybody's what you're interested in, what you can start off in, I can't speak to the instruction piece because I'm not an instructor. I help these guys out with a little bit of self-defense in the back end, but it's a very unique school in that everybody really gets to have their own niche.
And when you guys talk about, because I know you guys were talking about Heath the last time we talked about, and I can just tell by the team you have here, but just the leadership and the different team building, the focus of your dojo. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the thing is, martial arts as a whole tends to be a very individualistic thing. And that's kind of how I came up through. I was the youngest in my school at the highest rank. So it was the type of thing that I was always standoffish, I suppose. That's not the right word, but you get what I'm saying. It's a very independent activity because you're the one out on the floor. And what was happening is we were honestly kind of losing people to sports, and we weren't getting that, not even commitment, but that willingness to help each other out. Because when you get to a black belt, it's such a huge process, not only for you, the 6 months training physically to be able to do it, but you need people that are willing to travel with you and come in on a Saturday morning and get thrown around to make you the best possible. You need that team behind you. So it was actually, when we got done with COVID and sports kind of came back with a vengeance, and we started talking about making sure that we couldn't just constantly be taking a back seat to the sports. People had to make more of a choice and put karate a bit more forward, or martial arts in general. Jeanine actually was the one who came forward. Is like, well, the problem here isn't their commitment to themselves; it's commitment to each other. That's the issue. And that's when she actually started introducing a lot of these programs like mentor meetings and so forth to kind of turn the corner. And I'll let her kind of explain in more detail with that.
Yeah. So basically, as he said, it's okay that it's individualistic, but we saw a decrease in students cheering on other students at tournaments. So we had to figure out a way to change that culture. So the mentor meetings was one of the ways that we brought in the older intermediate students to give their ideas and give their opinions. And through that, they started working together as a team. And I kind of started off with the my success is your success thought, kind of getting the younger students to see that they needed each other to not only for self-defenses, but support. So we kind of slowly in the last few months have turned that culture around. It's like kind of like a flywheel. We were the only ones pushing it for a while, and now we've seen the students take a role like day camp. Rocky, you've heard me talk about that.
Yeah.
That's a huge team building. We all were there for that day. That was a huge team building experience. And like Sensei Legler said, we saw a difference in that, wouldn't you say? The teamwork, because the students have to help each other.
Because we're hunting them, so they're not getting any
Yeah.
help from the adults.
So they're solving things. So it's kind of like, and they've heard me talk about Bob. It's that flywheel. We're pushing that along, but we want the students to come and kind of keep that momentum going, and we step away so that we kind of leave it off to them, because in the end, you want to keep that culture and that momentum going. Leadership, I mean, you know about that as well in our team. So it's kind of changing their thought as far as being there for one another. Again, it is individualistic and they have to earn their rank themselves, but they can also utilize the support. And I think it's made a difference in how they think, about each other. And
Well, we had this was our 10th anniversary of our day camp, and we had probably double, if not triple, the amount of people who actually came this year. And great attitudes all the way around. I mean, it's 8 hours of getting stung by bees, sweating. It's tough, but they stuck through it. And we saw it with our last test in June, just the level.
testing.
It's not just the performance is up across the board and the retention's up, but also just people cheering each other on. And it's we've gotten a lot of praise from the parents and everything else, that it's a much more family oriented environment. It's not just you're going to karate for your 30 minutes once a week. It's, these are people that you can rely on,
Right.
that you can seek help for outside of the dojo.
Sure.
And it's become much more like team sports in that regard of, these are people that you can trust to help you out, and you need to be there for them to get that trust.
It's more about striking a bag for half hour a week, like Keith just said. You're instilling these leadership principles in these young kids, whether it be high school or even 5-6 years old. That's going to follow them through the rest of their life. And that's really unique here. It's something that you can see that they're willing to take the lead, even if they might not be the most experienced person in the room.
Right. And that's what we try to focus on with having individualistic tiers here. We can kind of see the students that have their individual talent, or some may not have talent, and we can guide them, but somehow it comes out where everyone has their own niche. So it works out well.
And the leadership's a big thing, because like her daughter, Kira, jumped right in. There was a kid that was getting a little nervous, getting kind of left behind during the camp, and just went right to it. Like that never would have happened before, where you have these higher ranks and older kids just automatically stepping in. So.
Well, I think a lot of the sports, there's a lot of individual sports like you guys are talking about, but I think the team concept that you guys are talking about, even in my job and in the business world, it's like, I love the mentorship program. I love that, because even when I was coaching football, we used to always try to pair up, the varsity kids with the younger kids. The varsity kids would go down to the Pop Warner program, and they were involved with the youth. But I think to be able to celebrate, the successes and be there like that, I think that's huge. Even though, like your sport is an individual sport, but you have that team concept that helps drive, those kids of all ages, not just 5-6 year olds, but, of all ages. So I think that's a huge thing in your guys' sport. So I like that. And Jeanine's talked a lot about that. So, and we've tried to do some of those things, in my job and in the business world and in all sports. It's huge. You celebrate the successes, and, it's not always going to be everything positive. There's going to be some shortfalls, but, when you do it as a group like that, I think that really separates, the individuals from the team. So I like that.
Yeah. And
I think it's a good concept.
I think that the students actually become an asset, because my sensei, he had sent us a link on his 6th Dan test, and he talked specifically about partner work and how important that was for him to succeed, because without a good partner, without someone to practice and learn from, you don't have anything. So
it's the old iron sharpens iron.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. So I think the kids are seeing that more, especially the older ones, because in black belt, I mean, you really, you have to have a good partner, because
Yeah, and there's an inherent advantage to being an individualistic sport too, because it's actually kind of counterintuitive. So in football, baseball, basketball, you're all competing as a team, but within that team, you're competing for a spot on the team. That's not the case with martial arts. You're as good as you can make yourself, and you can make everybody else better around you, and you can all grow and all succeed and all get that starting spot. That doesn't happen in really any other sport.
So Heath, I want to ask you this question. So from the time you got started in the business, you dealt with COVID, and it seems like you've gotten bigger, expanding your business since COVID, which is hats off to you, because there's a lot of businesses, owners like yourself, that unfortunately had closed their doors during the challenging times. But how have you grown yourself since joining and getting into the business?
From the beginning or from post-COVID?
Beginning.
One, I started learning how to actually run a business because when I started as a martial arts instructor, not as a business person. And we talked on some of the previous rock piles how there were challenges and everything else that you kind of learn trial by fire, when this happens or that happens. So that's helped me grow in regards to how to manage crisis. I mentioned when COVID hit, it was that was like the third or fourth major crisis that our business had. Joe's over here smiling because he's been with me through all of them. Jeanine has too. Is just you learn to not focus on everything that's going wrong. In that moment, you focus on what you have to do, what you need to do, and then move forward and just push through. So it doesn't matter if COVID's happening or a building falls down or whatever, there's still class the next day. And part of that, and our job is everything's fine. When the world's on fire, we're fine.
Going.
There's still class.
There's still
we're still teaching, smiling. So there's that sanctuary element that really, especially during COVID, became very needed for a lot of people. And it starts realizing that when you're up here, and as instructor, we take that very seriously because your personal crap doesn't come into the dojo. You have to make sure that even if everything's falling apart for you, you've got to stand up there and be like, hey, everything's fine.
Right.
And that's the lesson you're trying to instill on these guys, that there's always a way to work through something. There's always people that are going to have your back. And that's really where I grew from the business aspect, because it wasn't just all on me. Because the first 10, 12 years, it was just, all on me, and it didn't work. I shouldn't say it didn't work, but there was a limit, there was a ceiling. And that's why, starting with Joe and then Jeanine and then Levi, it's grown and it's better for it. And that's why it's taking a little bit of that. I'm just going to do it all myself and, pass it off too.
It's all about resilience and adaptation. That's a lot of martial arts. And when he says, crises, it's legitimately when your building falls down, that's a really big freaking crisis. not a lot of business owners go through that. So, like Keith said, COVID is like, okay, sure. Worldwide pandemic, let's go. We got it.
So you guys talk a lot about self-defense, and I think a lot of people interpret self-defense in numerous ways, myself included. How do you guys get the people to change the way they think of self-defense? Because you guys talk about it quite a bit. Talk to us a little bit about the mindset of people when they talk about self-defense.
Well, there is an actual self-defense industry. Okay, you go and you Google self-defense, you're going to get like 7 billion videos
urban defense.
Ranging from Master Ken to Lee Morrison, to like all this stuff, to gun guys, to I think like there was one group, it was like a woman's magazine that had on YouTube. It was like, you're going to pinch the attacker's thumb and then they're going to let go and you're going to be able to run away.
The urban self-defense guy.
Oh,
yeah.
Grab the slide and turn around. Works every time.
So the idea is what we actually started doing, again, part of the Zendo Kai is that was something with Sensei Campo. Self-defense was a huge portion from him. He actually started doing more self-defense stuff when traditional martial arts guys were still just punching logs type thing. He was very forward-thinking in that hands-on, trying to make it less static, less choreographed, less traditional. Because he came up through New York City and, the 70s, which was basically the Wild West, where dojo crashing was a thing. And that translated through with all the stuff. For us, we've tried to reclassify self-defense, because if you talk about all those 7 billion videos or whatever it is that's out there, is everyone's like, you want to throw the punch this way, and then the next video is, well, no, you want to throw it this way, and this way is going to get you killed. And what we started talking about is, when you talk about techniques and moves, those are force deployment systems. All right, so the striking, the weapons, the grappling, that is how you deploy force against another person. But that isn't really what we like to consider self-defense. Most of self-defense is actually prevention. It's mental and behavioral, recognizing other people, and also you're controlling your own, so that you're never in an actual physical engagement. So when we talk self-defense, that's really where we're going, is yes, the physical component is a part of it, and you need grappling and striking and weapons and all that stuff. But it's such a minor part. We've really tried to push, especially when we do seminars, getting people away from this. Well, we're going to do 2 hours of palm heel strikes. And the thing is, palms are good. There's tons of great programs out there of excellent striking. But in 2 hours, none of that's going to stick. Even if you have the best teacher and the best program in the world, when you hit that stress of a real life attack, it's just not going to happen. You have to develop, it's a lifestyle. If you're going to be able to fight someone, you have to physical fitness, grappling, striking, you have to devote hours a week for the rest of your life to make that happen. So we've really tried to push self-defense more as a mindset and a set of behaviors primarily. Learn that first, and then if you want to go, so that will make you safer than anything else. Because what we asked was, how can we basically, if we have 2 hours with somebody who's never going to train, who's never going to, how can we make them a little safer when they leave?
Right.
So that's where we go with self-defense, is that what's going to keep them out of danger? Because in a lot of cases, it's lip service. You know, we say, well, run away. But what we saw at the day camp, when kids had to run away from us, most people don't know how to run away. You know, when they talk active threats, run, hide, fight, people kind of gloss over that run and hide. But most people, your instincts are wrong in that. You don't know how to actually run. You don't know how to hide properly. So that's where we've been focused a lot with our stuff, is bringing the knowledge portion up and the preventatives and the recognition side of it. Then if people want to go get thrown around and punched in the face, there we are.
Well, you bring up a good point, because in Jeanine and my world, and with education, I think educating not only just students but teachers, because unfortunately, you turn on the news, you see all these horrible tragedies that are happening every day, and I think educating people on exactly what you guys are talking about, could help save a life. Someday, and even in our crazy world, in the education world, with busing, and you got crazy kids on the bus, and you never know what could happen on a bus. So I think that's really important. I think that education piece can affect a lot of different industries that are out there.
Absolutely.
And I know we've talked about that before, but I just think people have their own definition of what they feel. I think people say self-defense, they think, the karate piece, Heath, that you and I talked about. And I know I asked you before, and I'm going to have you talk about this again. The whole process for the time for somebody to invest into becoming a black belt. There's a lot of time that goes into that. What are the differences? Because I always hear people say, well, I'm a 6th degree black belt. I'm a 4th degree black belt. What goes into that?
Part of it is ranking differs between organization and even from school to school. And it can mean different things to different people. And our basis is the ranking is more a matter of, we have a clear step, basically program from white to black belt with a set curriculum, and that's that roadmap. Black belt for us really isn't an endpoint. It's honestly, all a black belt does is it represents that you have a solid foundation in that. So if you take karate, for example, the average person is going to be 6 to 7 years to get a black belt if they stick all the way through it. that just means you have a foundation of all the basics of striking that you need. It's not some magical gatekeeping thing that, well, now I'm a black belt, now I'm awesome, or I can learn all these special techniques. Disappointing for kids. They're like, well, what do you learn after black belt? Same thing you're learning at white belt. It's just now we're doing it and making it better. The higher degree black belts are in most of your Japanese systems. 5th degree is considered master, and then 10th is usually reserved to the founder of the style or grand master. So that's, and again, even there, like the head of our organization was a 9th degree. He just got his 10th degree before COVID. He still doesn't call himself a master, because mastery implies that there's no way to go forward. There's always a way, and we're a big believer, all of us, that there's always there's a better wheel out there. So that for black belt, we're trying to get people, in addition to self-defense, to think of it differently, that it's not just this thing where you're learning a bunch of katas. Is there's a process to getting this black belt that makes you more in line with self-defense, not because of magical techniques, but purely because of that's the investment you need. You know, you go to college to basically be considered a graduate, it's 4 years, and that's on top of grade school, high school, and everything else. But for some reason, self-defense, it's like, well, I can just do 6 hours, and now I can defend myself. Well, no, you need to invest 6 years of your life, and even then, that's not a end point. That's just you've got the basics. I mean, you want to add to that, everyone?
I'll jump in. There's a lot of schools, I don't want to name any specifically, that you'll buy a belt. You'll be there, okay, you're going to get a belt after this amount of time. You'll get yellow belt, purple belt, whatever it is. And at the end of it, you don't really understand what each of those levels mean. You don't understand what a black belt means. I'm a purple belt. I spent 4 years doing this, whatever it is. That's not what we do here. You know, we make sure they understand what each level is, what it means, and why it's different, and why you're not here just to get another belt to put on your wall. You know, it's a mark that you've achieved something, not that you've spent time waiting to achieve it.
You've reached the standard.
Pretty much, you're earning that.
I mean, you come out from a non-ranking system, basically, with the grappling and the wrestling and everything else. So you probably can talk more for normal people than anyone else, because you've kind of come into this thing where I'm like, hey, Levi, I want to do a white to black belt grappling program. You're like, it doesn't work that way.
Right. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, you've got like your jujitsu, which has its very clear, you know, then actually, no, it's not very clear, because every school is different, and it depends on who your lineage is. And then, you know, some people are getting their black belts in 10 years, some people are doing it in 5, and it's like, and the degree of ability there is so different. And yeah, for me, the idea of a belt is really odd, just because, you know, it was, and even like, I like the idea of earning something, but even I'm someone who I don't like symbols of accomplishment, because I feel like that a lot of times gives people, like you were saying, that like, oh, I've earned this now I'm done. Right. Okay. Or like, but like, whereas, you know, it's no, you need to constantly be sharpening those skills. And that's, I guess, so I like actually the way that Heath has explained it to me, that black belt is that really just a starting point, because that makes so much more sense to me than like, you know, okay, I spent 5 years and now I'm a pro. Well, no, you're definitely not a pro.
I got my black belt and it looks good on my college application.
Right.
So
whereas like I'm 22 years into, you know, grappling, and I still get mauled sometimes. You know, it's like sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail, and it's like, but it's, you know, it's nice to be able to humble yourself and be able to say like, okay, well, yeah, just because I have this black belt doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that I'm the greatest in the world. Like, cause you know, even, because
I mean, it's only 6 years in. I mean, who's an expert of anything in 6 years?
Right.
3 hours a week.
Exactly.
I
mean, yeah.
So I mean, if you're training like 8 hours a week type thing, 7 days a week, like in old school canal, 5 years, you could be pretty good. But, you know, if you're just doing like most people, 2 to 3 hours a week, you're not going to be an expert in anything
in
like 2 years.
So what is it, 10,000 hours to become an expert in something?
Yeah. 1,000 hours
like,
for muscle memory.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, again, think about, like you were saying before, like when you go to school, like you're doing it for years and years and years. And even then, a lot of times you finish and then you get your first job and you have no idea what you're doing. So I think it's the same thing with martial arts, that you can know it, but until you start applying it. And that's the other thing too, is, you know, that's what I like about what we're doing here, is that, you know, it's not just, okay, now I know the technique. It's, well, how and when do I apply the techniques?
In what scenarios?
Yeah, and I think that relates much more to the common person too. That, like, because karate, I think, has got a bad rap.
Mhm.
No, it does. Absolutely. Karate has a bad rap.
And that sucks because
Black
there's
belt
so
too,
many
right?
great. Well, yeah, and just
Yeah.
because how many people have just claimed, like, I have a black belt,
Yeah.
and it's like, with even that, I feel like it's disrespectful to the idea of the black belt. It's like, yeah, you worked. All those people who did work really
That
hard,
actually
who are
did do the
humble with
work.
the idea,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, like
So I
the idea of a black belt's like this indomitable person that can't be beaten, but
Not
you can catch a hook from a 6-year-old and get knocked out.
For true.
Oh, don't we know that? don't we know that? So that's the application, I think, is really the most important part, is applying it. You've got all these baselines, you've got all this foundation. Now what do we do? So let's work on transforming that. So I think that was a good way to put that.
And you'll do that until the day you die,
Yeah.
basically.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I want to ask you a couple points here. There's a couple parts of this question. Is it in just a short amount of time, I could see that he's so much has changed, in a couple of years with just your business in general. But I want to talk about the martial arts piece in general, and it's probably an open question to your whole team. So much has changed over the last 10, 15 years with martial arts. Do you anticipate any other changes down the road with martial arts itself?
Ooh, you asked me this one the first time, and I wasn't super happy about my answer back then. I don't know if you're going to do it.
Well, I wanted to try to catch you off guard because I did ask that, and I was going back through. I did go back and look at our interview, and I wrote down some notes. And it's really interesting to see how you've answered some of the questions tonight, because it's much different than you did before, which is great because that means you're evolving and you're bringing on your team tonight. I think is a great idea. But it's interesting to hear everybody's take, their philosophies, how just things have changed in just the last couple of years.
I mean, you can't speak for the industry as a whole because you have, I think the last time pre-COVID, there was a big push for kids, the sport martial art type thing, the accolades, the what looks good on a college diploma. And the thing is, I want to clarify, we're not calling out any particular schools or groups because there are schools that's how they pay the bills. They get the sport kids in there. It's popular, but they have they have 20 students that are just insanely good. Like, there's good programs in there. There's the business side and there's the martial arts side, and balancing that is something I think all martial arts schools struggle with. I think there's a bigger shift with the state of the world, and you read all these newspaper articles. There's a bigger shift toward the self-defense, not even self-defense, but the combatives. People are feeling unsafe, so there's a lot more talk of, what happens if this breaks down or this has, because we've seen a lot of violence. We've seen a lot of society kind of, maybe it's not as 100% stable as we thought it would. So I could see that over the next couple of years being a big, big element. I think though, I think we're going to see maybe less kids because of that. I don't know, because after COVID, sports came back like really, really hard.
Yeah.
It went from just Timmy wants to play basketball to I had an 8-year-old get pulled out because his basketball coach wanted 2-hour practices 6 days a week at 8 years old.
Yep.
And I don't know how much that's sustainable.
Right.
And I know a lot of schools now are pushing for one sport a year, just like year round, that same sport. It's something that some people have talked about. So I think you're going to see maybe less of the, groups of 55-year-olds in there all punching and kicking, and you're going to have maybe a bit better quality. That's me being optimistic. I mean, I don't know about you
I
guys.
think you'll see more older students coming in at a older age. So starting at 14, 16, even like in their mid-20s, people coming in. Because like he said, the veil kind of got pulled back a little bit during the pandemic, and we're like, okay, maybe we aren't as great off as we all thought we were.
Right.
So you'll watch like shows like Walking Dead where the CDC is this overall great, like all-knowing being, and then something actually happens, like, oh, they kind of don't know all that much. So, and no shade against them, but I that's the way I see it kind of shifting, is to more of these adult learners, which is where that one-on-one, the Zoom comes in, because now everybody knows Zoom. We're all comfortable with it.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
3-4 years ago, that might not be the case. But as we're shifting more towards, I don't know if it's exactly a one-on-one overall, but more towards a technology future. Not that we're not already there. You're going to get more individuals coming in that later stages where, okay, Timmy is going to play basketball. Now I'm going to go do my grappling for an hour and a half. And I think another part of that too is people had more time to self-reflect during COVID, during lockdown, and they're like, maybe I do have to better myself outside of the self-defense aspect. Maybe it's just, a retrospective look on the inside.
And you guys hit one topic on the head for me was I've always been a coach to encourage the multi-sport athlete. And I think one of the things that hurts us nowadays, and I've had this conversation with coaches, high school, college, you name it, athletic directors, superintendents. And I think that what's hurt us a little bit is we do have some programs, which again, I won't name names either, but that will encourage somebody, well, if you're going to play basketball, you got to play basketball all year round. Not just in the wintertime, but there's indoor facilities now that kids can go play basketball all year. I personally think that the martial arts side of things, what you guys are talking about, helps those multi-sport athletes with a lot of different things. And I think it's too bad because years ago when I was younger playing sports, my dad was the one who encouraged us to play more than one sport. So I think what you guys are talking about hits home for me that I don't think we have enough of that because I think that Johnny that just wants to play one sport all year round, I think doing martial arts in multiple sports, I think helps. It helps with every sport.
Well,
Yeah.
I think a lot of those coaches, they aren't considering the developmental aspect of that. So especially in those early years when all those motor neurons are finding their place and, they're innervating all these muscles, if you limit the number of inputs you have or the type of movements that you're doing, well, that person's going to become rigid in those movements. And it's going to be more difficult for them to learn other things later on in life, or it's going to limit their ability as an athlete overall.
Well, they actually did a study, it was a couple of years ago, where kids' joints were breaking down like 17, 18 years old. They're getting arthritis and everything from overuse of the joints because they're just doing one sport.
Sure.
Right.
But,
I can see that, yeah.
But I mean, and going to what Joe said with the older, I mean, the thing is martial arts, we're talking self-defense, and that's where our school is. I know, but but the thing is, even within our school, you can do competition for fun. You don't have to get super serious about it. You can go and grapple from the camaraderie, as what happened with Jeanine, just the meditative aspect of weapons and sword, so there's a whole lot of mental, physical, as Jeanine would say, spiritual cultivation that you can do. And that's, I think, appeals to a lot of older people that maybe you don't just want to go to the gym and lift weights and get screamed at by a trainer, but you want to feel, better and everything else. So
that
there's
offers on the table, though.
Right. We do it with them. So.
That's right.
But I think it also opens the door for other aspects of things like we're talking about is the different avenues that all together add to making you the best person that you can be. Especially you had mentioned the combatives. Do you think they're coming around a little bit more here or?
Again, people are thinking right now. This is not to be doom and gloom or anything like that. This is just, you have a lot more people, as Joe said, older going, maybe I should learn something because, the advice was even 10 years ago, well, get a gun and keep it in your purse. That's like the worst self-defense advice you could ever give anyone is just picking up a firearm, or even if you get a firearm, just putting it in your purse or your glove box. And so there's so much information out there. And part of it is because we were sitting around for 2 years and things are online. You start researching more. You have so much more information available to you. And I think that's a good thing because it is making people more honest. When you research, I came from a good system, but there's still pitfalls. Again, karate guys striking. I need grappling. Grapplers, as Levi said, they need striking. You need to take into consideration weapons and everything else. So I think overall, you're still going to have your sport groups, which is great. You're going to have that want the competition aspect. You're going to have the other, but it might balance out a little more equally. And I think you're going to maybe have some smaller groups. At least what's happening in our school is we're getting smaller, a little less students, but the quality is so much greater. And the commitment to each other in that group is so much greater. It's honestly better. Yeah, it hurts the bottom line a little bit, but at the end of the day, you know, you don't have anyone walking out of there thinking that they're just paying for something, you know, and you feel better from a moral aspect that, you know, I'm teaching somebody that's going to have an impact on them. And it always has, but it's more so now.
And you also don't have somebody walking out of the school just looking for a fight. It's just going to go and try to, you know, beat somebody's head off. So
trying to diffuse the situation.
Right. Just like he said, you know, you don't throw a gun in your purse because you're going to shoot yourself and you pull it out.
Right.
You got to understand the mentality behind why you're doing what you're doing.
Especially weapons.
Yeah.
Well, and then once you have some sort of martial art under your belt, like the confidence you walk around with, like it will deter a violent situation. Like, you know, if you, you know, start becoming aggressive with someone and they're confident in the way they hold themselves and, you know, they're avoiding the conflict, but they're not backing down. A lot of times, you know, the aggressors.
And learning to recognize those things is what,
and that's
what
huge.
we teach the students is knowing, don't be a bad target. Pay attention. Keep your face up instead of looking at your phone. Those little things, even to younger students, is detrimental to noticing a baseline change or knowing how your environment is going. So that's a lot of our, you know, our basis. Huge.
De-escalation is huge.
Verbal agility, all of those things as they go through, not only the physical, but learning the verbal agility, how to talk down someone, or just sometimes it's just matching them, right? Someone that before they become aggressive or it escalates. So that's a lot of our baseline with our AWARE program.
Yeah. And we've been very fortunate too, as my brother moved back into the area, and he was actually in executive protection for 6 years. So he saw real combat, and he's kind of helped all of us a little bit short of it. It helps that he's like 250 pounds and 6 foot. So that's kind of helped too. It's been kind of a perfect storm with this team coming together and him being here, and, you know, the aftermath of COVID, of being able to kind of take the path we were already on and jump several steps ahead into it. And I'm sure other schools are doing the same thing, you know, because martial arts schools are resilient and we're very good at figuring things out. And like I said, there's a lot of good programs out there, but as Joe said, we try to do things a little differently, which I'm sure everybody else says the same thing. But
yeah, we're really good at buzzwords.
Well, you guys have your own little niche, and I think that's important to have. You guys are going to do it the way you guys want to do it, no matter what everybody else is doing in the industry. You kind of have what works for you, and I think that's great. The only other thing I was going to ask you guys is, and Heath, maybe this is geared towards you, and everybody can jump in again, but can we expect anything on the horizon for your place? Any future things to look out for that you guys are working on?
Well, a couple quick ones is this September, we're expanding the grappling to a full hour. And then Jeanine's actually going and taking our sword program and actually starting Mighty Monkey version of the sword for little kids. And they'll actually get, instead of belts, they're going to get different colored katanas, like plastic ninja swords. So that'll differentiate the rank and then move right into there. But one thing we did, and we're not going to discuss it in any real detail here, is we actually sat down this past December and actually built a roadmap over the next 5 years of where we are going to take the school. And everything we talked about today is honestly just the first step of what's going to be going and where we're going to be in 5 years. It's still everything. Like if you look at where I started 15 years ago, you can see where that starting point was. It's not like we've replaced anything or changed direction, but it's just exponential instead of gradual. And anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, like he said, you know, we're always looking forward. We have a plan in place where we're going to continue to grow. I don't think a lot of other martial arts schools are going to do that. A lot of them, we've been here for 30 years, we do karate, and that's kind of the end of it. You know, we're running this as a true business. We pivot and we improve. We don't just kind of be happy with the paycheck we're getting and move on. So
Now I have the website coming across the bottom of the screen here. What is that the best way for people to reach out to you if they're interested? Is it go to the website and all the contact information is there?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, the website's very user interactive, user intuitive. It's all kind of right there for you. Any questions you have can be answered there. And if you have any other questions, drop a line. Phone number's at the bottom of the site, or email. There's a contact button right down there too.
Okay. Anything else you guys want to share with the viewers tonight?
Anything?
Good to have you back on, though, Heath. It's great to see how much you've grown over the last couple of years, and you got a great team in front of you, and it's really great. Again, I repeat, but the niche that you guys have and the direction, I think, a plan in place for the next 5 years is awesome. And it's just great to see that you're still on your feet and the success that you've had. So it's awesome to see that.
Well, I owe a lot to this group here. They've carried me through when I was falling short, because again, you can't wear two. You got one hat. There's only so many hats you can wear and everything else. So I've been very fortunate that these three have found me over the years and stuck with me and guided me, and I've been able to help them with their stuff, and we've all built off of what we needed. So very grateful to them, and thank you for having us on and everything else. And maybe in 5 years you'll have to do this again. You can see where we're at.
Well, no, listen, congratulations, guys, and I'm happy to have all you guys on. Heath, great to catch up again. Jeanine, it's always good to see you. And anything I can ever do, guys, reach out. But great to have you on.
Thank you
for having us.
Thanks.
You
Thanks,
too.
Rocky.
All right,
Thanks, Rob.
guys, have a good night. So that was Heath Waterman and his team with Jeanine, Levi, and Joe. And it's awesome to see, because I said this to the team before we came on. Heath was the first martial arts person that I got a chance to talk to and really learn about martial arts, because I always think, like we talked about, martial arts is karate, but there's so much more to it that goes on, and it's nice to see the progress he's evolved over the last couple of years. I love having guests back on. I think it's awesome. I got a chance to learn about his story of how he got involved in martial arts a few years ago during COVID. And now to have him bring on a team was even more special. So thanks again, Heath, to you, Jeanine, Levi, and Joe. You guys are welcome on the Rock Pile anytime, so just reach out. I'm happy to be back on here tonight. We'll be bringing back the college football podcast. I'll let everybody know we're planning on kicking things off here sometime the end of August, over the next couple weeks. I'll bring the coaches back on, and we will talk college football pretty much through the first of the year. So I'm excited for that. I'll be looking for sponsors for the football show. So just please reach out to me if you can help us out. Any amount helps. Always greatly appreciated. So as I say on the Rock Pile all the time, the Rock Pile is where dreams become reality. Have a good evening, everybody.